Have you ever found yourself reflecting? It's not worth it, so it's better to let it go. Dispute, I am larger than this. How often have you ingested the correct word? Essential reaction to the screams that became stuck in your throat in order to prevent a confrontation. I'll tell you something though. That could be painful to hear each time you betray yourself if you do this. The culture in which we live honors superficial tranquility from a young age. We are instructed that avoiding conflict is an indication of maturity, that being courteous entails keeping quiet about things that annoy us, that being silent is a sign of superiority. It is untrue. Z witnessed this with ruthless clarity. Realized how much of this quality you carry is just a covert form of fear, of conflict, fear of losing affection, or getting others' acceptance out of fear of being noticed as challenging, hostile, or self-centered. But as long as you're alive, I'll tell you, please stay out of arguments. You'll be condemned to swallow your own rage. This was dubbed the slave by the philosopher. Morality, a system of principles established by the unable to stop the bitter people who learned to hide as they were unable to respond. Behind an act of modesty and submission, and what's more worse is that this has become the standard and a model for actions. You believe you're doing well today, yet actually you're letting yourself be dominated. Take a moment to reflect. How many instances of unfairness have you put up with, only to keep things harmonious? How often have you kept quiet when you knew you had to say something? How many times have you accepted wrongdoing, disrespect, and degradation in the name of, I'm not here to tell you that, of peace? You ought to go around battling with. It's not about that, everyone. It's about taking back the right to exist alongside dignity, as I'll let you know if you don't learn to deal with disagreement. It will consume you. You're alive from the inside out. Anger will accumulate, and eventually you will no longer be able to tolerate it, and then you either blow up the worst way possible. If you become apathetic and believe that being decent entails being innocuous, but nature provides a philosophical solution that challenges you to end this pattern of submittal that demonstrates the degree of contention, rather from being an adversary that might be a route to your freedom. This movie will explore the natural world's thoughts on the dread of conflict. You'll comprehend how this slave your life is still shaped by morals now, and more crucially, how you can conquer it. Are you prepared to listen to some awkward facts, then do whatever you want until the finish? What you learn here could alter the how you view yourself in the world, to comprehend why you're afraid of fighting, so you must go beyond your personal life encounters and probe the depths of human moral history, and none has taken any action more tenaciously than Friedrich's focus on the origins of morality and nature. Exposes a harsh procedure that devalues you carry today, or whatever you consider to be good, did not originate from a noble soul, but from resentment, impotence, and the necessity of self-defense for the weak opposing the powerful. Picture a moment when strength was the law and warriors were noble men, not express regret for their desire for power. They set limits and dominated. The world's confirmation of their morality was affirmative and active. That which showed strength was good. Bravery, brilliance, and independence, however, there were some feeble people who, bitter and incapable, of winning the game of power. Without the ability to enforce, they only had one resource at their disposal, left to completely flip the game by establishing a new code of ethics based on the reversal of values from what was formerly positive. Courage, pride, and strength were evident. As terrible as sin, and the former state of frailty, humility, obedience, and submit was raised to the level of righteousness with a sincere will to be good, yet out. It was an act of survival out of need. This is what nature refers to as slave morality. Morality is not derived from thriving existence, but from the worth of life being denied system that exalts seclusion, passive renunciation as though they were better options when they're actually unintentional safeguards against the incapacity to take action. And you may believe that this is all behind us, but does this morality still exist? Influences the education you were given, and the expressions you've heard since you were a child. Be kind and don't argue or reply. Generate trouble since you were a young child. Conditioned to link conflict with evil and virtue-based obedience. Every time you don't say anything, bow your head or steer clear of conflict to preserve the seeming harmony that you're being controlled by this slave morality, but with compensation. This does not imply that you are paying attention. It indicates an inherent weakness or submissiveness. You were instructed to think that being powerfully enforcing your will and declaring it boundaries, you would be mistaken. We were taught to think that being goodness is the outcome of being innocuous. Psychological trend that ensnares millions of people are afraid of conflict. Fear of standing up, fear of asserting you persuade yourself of your own strength. That you are mature by staying away from disputes when, in reality, there is concern that immobilizes you. And the more you run away, the morality of slaves gets stronger inside of you, but there's more poison due to the fact that the rage you repression ferments rather than goes away, turns into resentment within you. And this will be the main topic of our next section. You'll comprehend how animosity, are you the secret source of this passivity? Carry, and how it makes your life less meaningful from the interior out. Thus continue the most difficult realities are still to come if the information makes sense to you. Click this subscribe button to sign up for the thank you for your support channel. Now that you know how morality works of the slaves influenced their anxiety about confrontation, it's time to take a closer look. Becomes one of the most damaging emotions. It causes animosity. Nature was an expert in analyzing the human spirit, and his analysis was unrelenting at times, such as when he explained how, on the lineage of morals, resentment, he clarifies that animosity develops when an essential impulse, the want to take action to enforce one's will, one must assert oneself. Dissatisfied and unable to materialize, however, the energy does not vanish. Turns inward rather than changing put into practice, it turns into poison. A person who harbors resentment would prefer to take action, but they are unable to, do not dare face the offender. They want to take up residence, however, they suppress because they fear the repercussions. This force and start building a moral argument to support their calmness. Because I don't react, I am better. I am more honorable. Because I am tolerant. The reason I am better is that I don't dispute. However, the truth behind all of this is false. In discussions about moral superiority, there is an unprocessed rage and unrecognized frustration, and a decaying sense of helplessness the soul. And even though you do not acknowledge it each time you stay remaining quiet in the face of a transgression, and then contemplate for hours what you may have claimed, that every time when you witness someone mistreating your kindness, and rather than making, you simply build up resentment for yourself. That is bitterness each time you act calm, but your feeling of becoming resentful at not being able to, that is, protect your limits. The resentful are warned by resentment. An individual is more than just a victim. They are and participate in their own incarceration by avoiding conflict when it arises. You must nourish this poison inside of you, and it eventually ruins you. Anger starts a vicious cycle that the more you avoid conflict, the more bitter you get, the more you lose. Bravery, because you are resentful. You sink because you have to face it, gradually turning into resentment and self-pity. The most terrible thing that many people do is get used to this situation and they use it to define who they are. Turn into selfless martyrs, proud of their alleged goodness when they are actually captives of their own terror. However, nature didn't think we were. There is a way to avoid being doomed to this fate, out a route of significant change, and it entails developing the will to strength, the capacity to make your living without guilt or shame. This is what we shall discuss without fear. Discuss what you will learn in the next section. How to recover this essential energy and break the trend for good and all of submission music. Thus far you have observed how the ethics of their terror is shaped by resentment and enslavement, of war, and put their life in prison. However, nature was not a cognitive being who was satisfied with just diagnosing the illnesses in the soul. He looked for roots of overcoming, and the secret to escaping this prison is located in one of his strongest ideas, the desire to power vua. It is an idea that has been substantially misunderstood historically. Some have diminished it to a wish for dominance over others as a grave mistake. Nietzsche mentions the will to power in his is discussing something far more profound. The essential force behind everything in life that wishes to grow and make its presence known, expand and go beyond its own boundaries. This is the urge that powers. It is the will that propels the seed to penetrate, allow the cub to discover the world. The ability of humans to create, conquer, and transcend, however, slave morality attempts to suffocate this will. As it states, make your want known without becoming conspicuous. Avoid confrontation and avoid being risky. It desires that you adhere to a minor, innocuous area that can be controlled. When your will is suppressed to power, it does not vanish. Instead, it corrupts and transforms against you, followed by bitterness. Recovering causes apathy and self-pity. Your desire to power entails getting back in touch. Utilizing the vital force you were instructed to fear implies giving up the illusion. Because submission is the source of virtue, which means acknowledging that there is conflict in life, and that conscientious confrontation is an action, that affirmation rather than needless violence. And how can you begin by acknowledging that? Conflict anxiety is not a virtue, is a hereditary vice, and must now begin, in order to overcome the second, to stand up for what you believe in. Learn to reclaim your boundaries by learning to say no. The third right to completely exist by developing the bravery to confront the inescapable disputes in life with consciousness and presence to prevent destruction the other. But to make your presence known in the desire for dominance in the world is not about to suppress it, is to stop being oppressed. It involves adjusting to integrity, a straight back, and an unfettered spirit. Yet nature was aware of this change takes time. It necessitates a thorough procedure and inner resurrection, and to describe this procedure, he provided us with one of the most insightful metaphors. Philosophy's transformation from the lion to the camel's spirit and between the child and the lion. We shall examine this in the upcoming section. You'll learn how to quit being the camel bearing the weight of surrender to transform into the lion that defeats freedom and ultimately the kid that produces new values. So let's go. Forward. If you find resonance in what you're hearing, my ebook has genuine value for you. Outside the Shadow, it dismantles Jung's key concepts and provides you with resources to learn more about yourself. The link is in the comment that was pinned not. Only did nature show us the concealed toxins of slave ethics, and in addition, he left us a symbolic blueprint for the internal metamorphosis that each of us needs to do if we wish to cut these chains. In the piece, Zarathustra said explains the three transformations of the child, lion, camel, and spirit. It is not merely a metaphor. Rather, it is an existential roadmap that shows the way to freedom. Let's begin with the camel. The spirit that conveys is the camel. Strains, it sags beneath the weight of societal norms, expectations of others, and moral duties that a society imposes that honors inaction. You have to obey. You have to swallow your pride and be humble. You must avoid confrontation if you are hungry. Everything is accepted by the camel, robust in its capacity to withstand, although it is the strength that is sterile, of surrender rather than invention. And to exacerbate the situation, the camel takes joy in the more it submits. The more it suffers, the more it thinks it's good. This is the stage that the majority of people inhabit. And maybe you see yourself in it. However, nature doesn't abandon us there. There comes a time when the essence of the camel rebels because it can no longer stand the weight of its wants and the lies it bears freedom. It seeks to make its presence known, and it must turn into a lion in order to do that. The lion represents the spirit that learns to refuse requests from outside prohibitions against slave morality. Social roles that make it less important is the manifestation of the will that has awakened to authority. Yet observe that the lion doesn't look to cause devastation for its own sake. It fights for room for an internal area in which it can be found genuinely. The lion must confront this area in order to conquer it. The dragon is the greatest of all dragons. When you do, this dragon will gleam with the 1,000 scales, and on every scale there is the commandment to be meek has been written. You must be obedient. You must steer clear of fighting to defeat this dragon. You must have the courage to face rejection, criticism, and disapproving glances. You'll have to face your guilt that you have assimilated since youth, yet this is an essential struggle, as only when you figure out how to say no in a sincere and thoughtful way, release yourself from the confines of submission, followed by the final transformation of the child, who is the renewed spirit unburdened by the burden of the camel, is no longer in need of defense. The soul of the lion is now imaginative. It no longer survives by responding. Instead, its creation generates its own values, decides which places to submit and which rebel. It lives a modest, genuine life. Happily, this is the point at which conflict no longer takes place on a battlefield and turns into a place where you can create no longer aim to outdo the other, but instead be assertive based on who you. This is the real rebirth that genuinely nature offers, but in order to get there, you must endure the flames of conflict. Crossing the desert is necessary. You must overcome doubt and rejection, permanently out of concern that keeps you shackled. Which brings us to a crucial query. How do you find your true self behind everything? These levels of fear and obedience nature provides us with a potent response in Axihomo. This is the route to being who you are. What the following section will examine, you'll see why dealing with disagreement is necessary, is an important step in figuring out your genuine self and how this adventure can change every area of your life. Now that you comprehend the procedure of changing from a camel to a lion, it's time to go from lion to child. Recognize the true stakes. One of the problems that nature presents to us is deepest and most thought-provoking concepts of his whole notion of becoming who you are. He expresses this formula in Exomo as an invitation and concurrently as a caution, since figuring out who you are is not an instinctive, spontaneous, or natural. On the contrary, the process is difficult, and the first conflict you must defeat is specifically in opposition to the dread of war. Have you ever given any thought to how you spend a lot of your life serving other people? How many times have you decided on this course that would satisfy your parents, partner, your co-workers, or friends? Even if you didn't truly want that, how have you swallowed your truth too many times? To prevent discomfort, we learn from nature that this is the most pernicious pitfalls of life. Most people never develop into their true selves. They play roles all their lives, mask-wearing and conforming to expectations, attempting to be who they think they ought to be, but the cost is harsh. Regarding this fictitious piece, every time you repress a part of your actual will, dies every time you miss a crucial battle, your identity becomes somewhat less distinct. Greater every time you affirm when you wanted to tell them no, you should go farther away. From your true self, nature realized that conflict. Phobia is not only a behavioral issue, but also an existential barrier due to the fact that conflict is the area in which identity is created is in the conflict with the outside world, utilizing concepts that you learn about what you genuinely cherish, what you genuinely think you really want there to be conflict-free, is unable to understand oneself without self-awareness that authenticity does not exist. Without genuineness, there would be no complete life as but a blank theater. Therefore, to become who you are, you must have the bravery to confront the essential conflict, refusing to meet other people's expectations, saying no to the roles that are forced upon you, to your inclination to adjust in and return for approval. Although there is additional nature, serves as a reminder that this rut is deeply personal. There isn't ready-made model for the person you ought to, therefore there is no longer any universal morality that you have to make and adhere to your own course, your own principles, and your own manner of life, which is terrifying. Because without the herd's regulations, it hurts you at first to be alone. Lose praise, you lose the appearance of security, but you also receive something far more valuable than potential for leading an honest life. Every dispute that is confronted with awareness is each enforced boundary as you proceed down this road. Clearly, this is an affirmative action. Whenever you express your truth, even you take a step while trembling and terrified. In your own direction, Nietzsche doesn't guarantee us solace. Gives us the opportunity to live as genuine people, and that is valuable, greater than any societal acceptance. But for that, one must acknowledge an uncomfortable factual silence in the face of unfairness among mistreatment, and the being oppressed is not a sign of virtue. Complicity, and we will discuss that. In the final segment of this video, you will comprehend the reason for the quiet that you might have developed as an indication of, in fact, compassion nourishes all that ways to break free from oppression. And for everyone involved in this cycle, since you've come this far, it's time to confront a reality that many would rather avoid: being silent, because it has a cost. How many times is that a small price? You convinced yourself that being quiet was the best decision, but it wasn't worth battling for something that wouldn't change something that was best left alone. The number of times you've swallowed small and huge humiliations and disrespects, mistreatment in the name of alleged harmony. But this is the truth. Each time you select quiet in the you